They say that after 50, a woman becomes invisible to the world. And honestly, I was counting on it. I had spent the last 4 years carefully fading into the scenery, convinced that my life's most vibrant chapters were already written and filed away. But that was before a homeless man named Samuel handed me a rusty Canon AE1 and challenged me to find 12 things that weren't beige. I didn't know it then, but that cold, heavy camera wasn't just a tool for capturing light. It was the key to unlocking a second act I never saw coming. I had become an expert at blending into the background. At 50 years old, I had mastered the art of beige. I wore beige cardigans, drove a beige sedan, lived in an apartment complex painted a rigorous shade of off-white sand, and held a job that was the professional equivalent of stale toast, a receptionist at the Good Shepherd Senior Center. It wasn't that I was unhappy. Unhappy requires energy. Unhappy requires passion. I was just paused, like a movie that had been stopped halfway through because the viewer got distracted and wandered off to do laundry. My husband, Richard, passed away 4 years ago. The grief had been a tsunami at first, drowning me, but now it had receded into a low-tide mudflat of silence. My daughter, Sophie, was a corporate lawyer in Chicago who communicated with me primarily through emojis and Google Calendar invites. "Mom, are you okay? You sound tired," Sophie had texted last week. "I'm fine, honey, just existing," I had typed, then immediately deleted it. Instead, I sent, "Just watching Netflix. Love you." Every morning, my routine was as precise as a Swiss watch if Swiss watches were powered by anxiety and lukewarm coffee. I took the 7:15 a.m. bus towards downtown Minneapolis. I got off 2 stops early, not because I was an athlete, but because my doctor, Dr. Patel, had looked at my cholesterol levels and made a face that suggested I was personally offending him. "Walk, Eleanor. Just walk," he'd said. So I walked, and that was how I met Samuel. Samuel didn't fit the stereotype of the homeless men I usually saw on the news. He wasn't yelling at pigeons or pushing a cart full of scrap metal. He was distinct. He was a fixture on the third bench from the left outside the public library. He was 55, though the Minnesota winters had etched lines into his face that made him look a hardened 60. He had a shock of salt and pepper hair that was surprisingly well kept, and he wore a faded navy blue pea coat that had clearly seen better decades. Our transaction was simple. I would stop at the corner bakery, buy 2 cinnamon scones, one for me, one for him, and a large black coffee. "Good morning, Samuel," I would say, placing the items on the bench. "Good morning, Duchess," he would reply. His voice was a rich baritone, like gravel tumbling inside a cello. He called me Duchess because the first time we met, I had tripped over a curb and tried to play it off with an awkward curtsy. He hadn't let me live it down since. Usually, that was it. A nod, a smile, and I would scurry off to work before anyone noticed I was talking to the vagrant. But today was different. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of day where the sky is a flat, oppressive gray and the wind feels like a personal insult. I approached the bench, the steam from the coffee cup curling around my gloved fingers. "Coffee's hot today, Samuel. Don't burn your tongue." Samuel didn't reach for the cup. He was sitting differently today, upright, intense. His dark eyes, usually crinkled in amusement, were locked on me. "No scone today, Duchess," he said. I froze. Is your stomach bothering you? I can get oatmeal. The cafe has decent oatmeal." "My stomach is fine. It's my eyes that are tired." He shifted, reaching into the deep pocket of his coat. "And I think yours are too." "My eyes?" I blinked behind my rimless glasses. "I have 20/20 vision, Samuel. Well, with the readers, but—" "You look, Eleanor, but you don't see." It was the first time he had used my real name. It sounded heavy coming from him, stripping away the playful barrier of Duchess. Samuel pulled his hand out of his pocket. He wasn't holding a weapon or a flask or a sign asking for change. He was holding a camera. It was a beast of a machine. A Canon AE-1, chrome and black leather, heavy and cold. It looked like it belonged in a museum or around the neck of a war correspondent in a 1970s movie. It was scuffed, the leather peeling slightly at the corners, but the lens was pristine, a glass eye staring unblinkingly at me. "Take it," he commanded gently. "What?" "No. Samuel, I can't take your—" "Is that valuable? You should sell it. You could get a warm room for a few nights." He laughed, a dry, raspy sound. "I tried. Pawn shop guy offered me $20. Said film is dead. Said nobody wants to work for a picture anymore. They just want to tap a screen and put a filter on it." He shoved the camera into my hands. It was heavier than I expected. It felt dense with potential. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked, bewildered. "Because yesterday, you stood on this corner for 5 minutes staring at that maple tree over there." Samuel gestured to a tree flaming with autumn red. "Everyone else walked past it. You stopped. You looked like you wanted to say something to it." I felt a flush creep up my neck. I had stared at that tree. The color had reminded me of a dress I wore on my honeymoon in 1995. "I found this in my storage unit before. Samuel waved a hand vaguely at the street, indicating his current life. "It still has film in it, half a roll, maybe 12 shots left." "I don't know how to use this," I protested, trying to hand it back. "I don't even know how to turn it on. Where's the screen?" Samuel stood up. He was taller than me, towering even in his worn boots. He placed his hands over mine, curling my fingers around the lens barrel. His hands were rough, cold, but steady. "There is no on button, Duchess. It's always on. You just have to be ready." He tapped the side of my head. "The battery is in here. The screen is in here." "Samuel, I can't. I want you to take 12 pictures." He interrupted, his tone brokering no argument. 12 things that make you feel something other than fine. 12 things that aren't beige. And then what? Then bring it back to me. If you mess it up, well, I'm only out $20 from the pawn shop." He sat back down, picked up the coffee, and took a sip, effectively dismissing me. "Go on now. You'll be late for the senior center. Don't want Mrs. Holloway yelling at you for being tardy." I stood there for a moment, the cold metal of the camera biting into my palms. I looked at Samuel, sipping his coffee as if he hadn't just handed me an artifact. I looked at the maple tree. I looked at the stream of gray-faced commuters rushing past, heads down, phones lit. I raised the camera awkwardly to my eye. The viewfinder was dark, dusty, and confusing. A circle with a needle in it. I pointed it vaguely at Samuel. "Don't waste the film on me," he rumbled without looking up. "I'm part of the scenery. Go find the story." I lowered the camera. My heart was doing something strange, a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. It was a little bit of fear and a little bit of thrill. I tucked the camera inside my beige coat, feeling its weight against my ribs like a second heart, and turned to walk the rest of the way to work. For the first time in 4 years, the walk didn't feel like a trudge. It felt like a hunt. I spent the entire morning at the Good Shepherd Senior Center, suspecting the camera was judging me. It sat in my oversized tote bag, tucked beneath a Tupperware container of leftover tuna casserole and a spare cardigan. Every time the phone rang, or Mrs. Gable complained that the thermostat was rigged by government agents, I felt the weight of that chrome brick. It was heavy with expectation. During a lull in the bingo signups, I furtively Googled how to use Canon AE-1. The results were terrifying. People were talking about ISO, aperture, depth of field, and f-stops. It sounded less like photography and more like advanced calculus mixed with wizardry. I watched a YouTube video of a 20-year-old hipster explaining how to load film. He did it in 3 seconds with one hand. I tried to replicate the motion under my desk, fumbled, and nearly popped the back of the camera open, terrified I'd expose the mysterious film to the fluorescent lights of the reception area. "Eleanor, are you praying?" I jerked my head up. Tiffany, the center's new 20-something volunteer, was staring at me. "No, Tiffany, just looking for a pen," I lied, shoving the camera back into the bag. By the time my lunch break arrived, I was ready to surrender. I marched down the street to the library, the autumn wind whipping my hair across my face. Samuel was there, exactly where I left him, reading a discarded newspaper with the intensity of a stockbroker. I sat down next to him and placed the camera on the bench between us. "I can't do it," I announced. Samuel didn't look up from the sports section. "Vikings lost again. Surprise, surprise." "Samuel, listen to me. I Googled it. This machine requires a degree in physics. I'm a receptionist. My biggest technical challenge is unjamming the copier." I sighed, defeatingly. "Here, take it back. Give it to someone who knows what an f-stop is." Samuel finally folded the paper. He looked at the camera, then at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You think I gave it to you because I thought you were a technician? If I wanted technical perfection, I'd give it to a robot." "It has no auto mode, Samuel. What if I mess it up? What if the pictures come out black or blurry?" "Then they're black and blurry," he shrugged. "Life is blurry sometimes. Why should pictures be different?" He picked up the camera. His hands, usually hidden in his pockets to keep warm, moved over the controls with a muscle memory that fascinated me. It was like watching a pianist's fingers hover over keys. "Come here," he said, shifting to make room. "School is in session." I scooted closer. He smelled of old paper and rain, a scent that was strangely comforting. "Forget the Google kids," Samuel said, holding the camera up. "Think of the camera like an eye. That's all it is, a mechanical eye." He pointed to the ring on the lens. "This is the aperture. It's the pupil. If it's dark, you open it up wide to let the light in. If it's bright, you squint. You close it down. That's it." "And the other dial?" I asked, feeling like a slow student. "Shutter speed. That's the blink. How fast do you blink? Fast enough to freeze a hummingbird? Or slow enough to let a ghost trail behind a moving car?" He handed the camera back to me. "Don't overthink the math, Duchess. Look at the light. What is the light doing?" I looked around. It was noon. The sun was harsh, cutting through the clouds. "It's bright?" I offered weakly. "It's flat," Samuel corrected, pointing at a businessman eating a sandwich on a nearby bench. "See? No shadows. Boring. But look over there." He pointed toward the library entrance. The revolving glass doors were catching the sun, throwing fractured, dancing reflections onto the gray pavement. A little girl in a bright yellow raincoat, despite the lack of rain, was stomping on the reflections as if they were puddles. "Do you see it?" Samuel whispered. I did. I saw the contrast. The gray concrete, the electric yellow coat, the fleeting shards of light. "Set the ring to 5.6, Samuel instructed softly. "Turn the top dial to 250. That should be safe." I fumbled with the dials. They clicked with satisfying mechanical precision. Click, click. "Now lift it. Don't hesitate. Frame it. Focus." I raised the viewfinder to my eye. The world instantly shrank into a rectangle. I twisted the focus ring. The blurry blob of yellow sharpened into a girl. I could see the determination on her face as she tried to stomp on a beam of light. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt ridiculous to be this nervous about taking a picture. "Wait for it," Samuel murmured. "Wait for the moment." The girl raised her boot high, ready for a massive stomp. "Now." I pressed the button. Clack, whir. The sound was startlingly loud. It wasn't the polite beep of a smartphone. It was a mechanical crunch, a physical event. Mirrors flipping, curtains sliding. I felt the vibration in my cheekbone. I lowered the camera, breathless. I think I got it. You got something, Samuel grinned. Whether it's in focus is between you and the developing lab, but you took the shot. I looked at the girl, who was now being dragged away by her mother. The moment was gone, vanished into the ether. But inside this black box, latent on a strip of chemical-coated plastic, that split second existed. How do you know all this? I asked, looking at Samuel with new eyes. The aperture, the speeds, you talk like a pro. Samuel's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked away, his gaze drifting to the library windows. I used to work in a studio, he said quietly. A long time ago, before the divorce, before the drinking, before the spiral. He tapped the camera body. I used to shoot portraits, weddings, happy things. Then I stopped seeing the happy things, so I put the camera away. He turned back to me, his eyes intense. Don't be like me, Eleanor. Don't stop seeing. The vulnerability in his voice made my throat tight. I wanted to ask more, but I knew the door to his past had been cracked open only an inch, and now it was gently shutting again. 11 shots left, Samuel said, his tone shifting back to playful gruffness. You've got work to do. And fix your scarf. You look like you've been wrestling a raccoon. I laughed, adjusting my beige scarf. I looked down at the camera. It didn't look like a burden anymore. It looked like a key. Same time tomorrow? I asked. Unless I get a date with a supermodel, Samuel winked. But don't hold your breath. I walked back to the senior center, my step lighter. The world still looked gray, but now I found myself scanning the sidewalk, looking for reflections, looking for cracks where the light got in. I wasn't just walking. I was hunting for the next clack. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a nuisance. I was no longer Eleanor, the invisible receptionist. I was Eleanor, the lurking paparazzi of the mundane. The Canon AE-1 hung around my neck like a heavy metallic talisman. I took it everywhere. The grocery store, the bus stop, the laundromat. My co-workers at the Good Shepherd Senior Center were baffled. Eleanor, Mrs. Holloway said one morning, peering over her bifocals. Why were you photographing the mop bucket in the janitor's closet? The light, Patricia, I said, trying to sound artistic while unclogging the stapler. The way the fluorescent bulb hit the soapy water, it was very noir. She stared at me. It's dirty water, Eleanor. Please answer the phones. Tiffany, the millennial volunteer, was more supportive, though patronizing. It's so cute that you're doing a retro thing. Vintage is super in right now. You're like an unintentional hipster. I didn't care. The first roll of film had come back from the drugstore photo lab. Yes, they still exist. Tucked between the greeting cards and the pharmacy, and the results had been a revelation. 8 of the 24 shots were disasters. 3 were pictures of my own thumb, which was apparently very photogenic. But 4 of them made my breath hitch. There was the girl in the yellow raincoat, frozen mid-stomp, a blur of pure kinetic joy against the gray concrete. There was a shot of a rusted fire escape that looked like intricate lace against the sky. And there was a portrait of Mrs. Gable at the center, laughing so hard her eyes had disappeared, the lines on her face mapping a century of stories. I taped them to my refrigerator. For the first time, my kitchen didn't look like a model unit for a depressing apartment complex. It looked like someone lived there. Then, Sophie came to visit. My daughter swept into the apartment on a Saturday afternoon, bringing with her a gust of expensive perfume and corporate efficiency. She was in town for a deposition and had squeezed me in, between a brunch meeting and a flight back to Chicago. She stopped dead in front of the refrigerator. "Mom," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Why is there a picture of a pigeon eating a Cheeto on your fridge?" "It's compositionally interesting," I said defensively, pouring her tea. "The contrast between nature and processed cheese." Sophie turned to me, her brow furrowed. She spotted the camera sitting on the counter. "Is this new? Where did you get that dinosaur?" "A friend gave it to me." "A friend? Who? Sherry from the knitting circle?" "No, Samuel, he's a friend from the library." I didn't mention the bench. I didn't mention the pea coat. I knew Sophie. She saw the world in spreadsheets and liability clauses. She wouldn't understand a transaction based on scones and soul-searching. "Mom," Sophie sighed, sitting down and rubbing her temples. "Are you okay? I mean, really? First, you stop answering my texts immediately. Now you're taking pictures of trash and pigeons. Is this a phase, like the Zumba incident of 2018? "It's not a phase, Sophie. It's a hobby. I'm enjoying it." "It just seems a little manic," she said, reaching for a cookie. "You're 50, Mom. You should be relaxing. Maybe join a book club or date. I could set you up with one of the partners. He's 60, divested, owns a boat." "I don't want a boat, Sophie. I want to take pictures." "I just worry about you," she said, her voice softening into that tone people use for children and pets. "Dad's been gone 4 years. I know it's hard, but maybe you're grasping at things to fill the void. This camera, it's just a distraction." She left an hour later to catch her flight. She kissed my cheek and told me to get some rest. I stood in the silence of my apartment. The photos on the fridge suddenly looked silly. A pigeon, a mop bucket, an old woman. Sophie was right. I was a middle-aged widow playing pretend. I wasn't an artist. I was just a lonely woman with an old camera. I took the photos down and put them in a drawer. The next morning, I didn't bring the camera to the bus stop. I walked to the library empty-handed. Samuel was waiting. He had a croissant today. He must have found a few dollars or had a good day panhandling. He broke it in half as I sat down. "Where is it?" he asked, not looking at me. "Home," I said, staring at my sensible beige shoes. "I think I'm done, Samuel. It was a fun experiment, but I'm not a photographer. My daughter visited. She thinks I'm having a crisis." Samuel chewed slowly. "Daughters are designed to keep mothers humble. It's in their job description." "Did she see the pictures?" "She saw the pigeon." "And?" "She asked why I was photographing trash." Samuel laughed, startling a nearby squirrel. "Critics. Everyone's a critic. Let me ask you something, Duchess. When you took that picture of the pigeon, were you thinking about your daughter?" "No." "Were you thinking about your late husband? Or your cholesterol? Or the heating bill?" "No," I admitted. "I was just looking at the orange dust on the beak. It was funny." "Exactly," Samuel said. He reached into his coat pocket. "You were present. You were alive in that second. That's not a crisis, Eleanor. That's living." He pulled out a piece of paper. It was wrinkled, stained with coffee, and looked like it had been rescued from a recycling bin. He smoothed it out on his knee. "I found this yesterday, stuck to a telephone pole." He slid it toward me. It was a flyer, printed on neon green paper. The Minneapolis Hidden City Photo Contest. Theme, The Beauty We Ignore. First prize, $500 and a feature in the City Arts magazine. Deadline, Sunday. "Samuel," I said, shaking my head. "No, absolutely not. This is for real photographers, art students, hipsters with waxed mustaches." "The theme is The Beauty We Ignore," Samuel read, tapping the paper with a grimy fingernail. Who knows more about being ignored than us, Eleanor? You, the invisible widow. Me, the invisible bum. I can't. You can. And you will. He fixed me with those intense dark eyes. You have 3 days, 1 roll of film. I want you to enter. Why? I asked, frustration bubbling up. Why do you care so much? It's just a stupid hobby. Samuel's face softened. The playful edge vanished, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. Because, he said quietly, I gave you that camera because I thought it was dead. I thought I was dead inside. But when you showed me that blurry picture of the yellow raincoat girl last week, you looked like you had just woken up from a 10-year coma. And it made me feel like maybe I hadn't wasted my life. He pushed the flyer into my hand. Prove your daughter wrong, Duchess. Prove me right. 1 shot. That's all it takes. I looked at the neon green paper. Then I looked at Samuel. For the first time, I didn't just see a homeless man. I saw a man who was fighting for my dignity because he had lost his own. Fine, I whispered. But if I lose, you owe me a scone. Samuel grinned, the gold tooth in the back glinting. Deal. Now go get your weapon. We have a city to capture. I spent Friday wandering Minneapolis like a woman possessed. I photographed a crack in the sidewalk where a dandelion was fighting a losing battle against concrete. Too cliché. I photographed a rusted padlock on a chain-link fence. Too depressing. I photographed a reflection of the skyline in a puddle of motor oil. Too first-year art student trying to be deep. With every click of the shutter, I felt the deadline looming like a storm cloud. The beauty we ignore. It sounded so simple on the neon green flyer, but through the viewfinder, everything just looked ordinary. Or worse, it looked like poverty tourism. I didn't want to exploit the grit of the city just to win $500. By late afternoon, the sun was beginning its descent, casting those long, dramatic shadows that photographers call golden hour. The light turned the gray city into something briefly magical, painting the brick buildings in hues of amber and honey. I found myself back at the library. My feet just sort of took me there, gravitating toward the bench like a homing pigeon. Samuel was there, whittling a piece of driftwood with a pocket knife. He looked up as I approached, shielding his eyes against the low sun. You look like you've been to war, Duchess, he noted. And lost. I have nothing, I admitted, collapsing onto the other end of the bench. I have 20 pictures of garbage and weeds. I'm a fraud, Samuel. You were right. I should have just stuck to spreadsheets. I never said you should stick to spreadsheets, he corrected gently. I said you needed to see. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the way the late afternoon sun caught the silver in his beard, turning it into spun wire. I saw the deep grooves around his eyes, lines etched not just by age, but by laughter that had long since faded, and sorrows that had settled in to stay. I saw the dignity in the way he held his shoulders, despite the faded peacoat that was 2 sizes too big. I saw the texture of his hands, rough and scarred, working the wood with surprising tenderness. He was right there, the beauty we ignore. People walked past him every single day, hundreds of them. To them, he was an obstacle, a statistic, a cautionary tale to avert their eyes from. Samuel, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah? I want to photograph you. He stopped whittling. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. He looked down at the wood shavings on his lap. No, he said flatly. I'm not a model, Eleanor. I'm a mess. You don't want a picture of an old bum in your contest. People see enough of me. They don't see you, I insisted, leaning forward. They see the coat. They see the bench. They see a problem to be solved or avoided. I want them to see the man who taught me about aperture, the man who calls me Duchess, the man who saved my life, in a way. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of the camera. It was the fear of being truly seen, of being exposed without the armor of invisibility he had worn for years. I haven't had a portrait taken since my wife, Clara, died, he said, his voice cracking. 10 years ago. We took a photo at the lake. She was sick then, but she was smiling. After she passed, well, the house got too quiet. The bills piled up. The grief. It was like gravity, Eleanor. It just pulled me down until I hit the pavement. And I stayed there. My heart ached for him. It mirrored my own story, but where I had frozen in beige safety, he had shattered. Let me take it, I pleaded softly. Just one frame. If you hate it, I'll burn the negative. I promise. He studied my face, searching for any sign of pity. He wouldn't have tolerated pity, but all I had was respect. Slowly, imperceptibly, he nodded. Okay, but make it quick, before I lose my nerve. We moved to the side of the library, where the brick wall was warm and bathed in that incredible, fleeting amber light. What do I do? He asked, suddenly awkward, straightening his collar with trembling hands. Do I smile? Do I look at the horizon like a visionary? Just look at me, I said, lifting the heavy cannon to my eye. I adjusted the focus. The world blurred, then sharpened. Samuel's face filled the frame. Through the lens, the distractions of the street vanished. There was no homeless shelter, no poverty, no judgment. There was just a human being. I saw the intelligence in his dark eyes, the resilience in the set of his jaw. Tell me about Clara, I murmured, my finger hovering over the shutter release. Samuel's expression softened, the tension in his forehead smoothed out. He wasn't looking at a camera anymore. He was looking at a memory. She loved jazz, he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. She had a laugh that could crack a window. She used to say, Samuel, don't look at your feet. The sky is free. The light hit his eyes perfectly. It was a moment of pure, raw humanity. It was grief, yes, but it was also love. It was the enduring beauty of a soul that had survived the fire. Click. The mirror slapped up and down. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet alley. I lowered the camera. My hands were shaking. I knew, with a certainty I hadn't felt in decades, that I had it. Did you get it? Samuel asked, his voice thick. I think so, I said, wiping a sudden tear from my cheek. I think it's beautiful. Samuel let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging with relief. Good, because I'm charging you a premium modeling fee. I laughed, a wet, choked sound. Oh yeah? What's the rate? Dinner? He said, stepping away from the wall and buttoning his coat back up, returning to his armor. Not a scone. Real food. A burger. With cheese. And maybe some fries. You got it, I said, clutching the camera to my chest. Dinner is on me. We walked to a nearby diner, an odd pair, the receptionist in her sensible heels and the homeless man in his worn boots walking side by side. For the first time, I didn't care who saw us. I didn't care if Sophie would approve. I had the shot. But more importantly, I had the friend. And as we walked into the diner, bathed in the dying light of the golden hour, I realized that for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't just observing the world from a distance. I was in the center of the frame. The gallery smelled of cheap Pinot Grigio and expensive pretension. It was located in a converted warehouse in the North Loop, the kind of place where the exposed brick walls were worth more than my entire life's savings. The crowd was a sea of black turtlenecks, asymmetrical haircuts, and thick-rimmed glasses. And then there was me, wearing my fancy navy blue dress, a daring departure from the usual beige, and clutching a plastic cup of lukewarm water like a lifeline. I felt about as artistic as a tax return. I should go, I muttered to myself, checking my watch. I can still catch the 7:45 bus. I can be home in time to watch Dateline. I had dropped off the photo 3 days ago, sliding it across the counter to a bored-looking intern with a nose ring. I hadn't heard anything since. I assumed my entry had been tossed into a reject pile, or worse, used as a coaster. But Samuel had insisted I attend the opening reception. "You have to witness the development, Duchess," he'd said. "Taking the picture is only half the job. Letting the world see it is the other half." I scanned the room for him. We had agreed to meet here. I had spent yesterday afternoon dragging him to a Salvation Army, where we found a tweed blazer that smelled only faintly of mothballs and a pair of corduroy pants that fit surprisingly well. When he had stepped out of the changing room, the transformation had been startling. He didn't look like a man who slept on a bench. He looked like a retired geography professor who had misplaced his tenure. "Eleanor?" I turned. Standing near the entrance, looking uncomfortable but strangely regal, was Samuel. He was holding his cap in his hands, his silver hair combed back. "Samuel," I breathed, rushing over to him. "You made it. You look dashing." "I look like I'm about to sell you an encyclopedia from 1982, he grumbled, tugging at the collar of the blazer. "This place is loud, and why is everyone whispering?" "Because it's art," I whispered back. "If you talk at a normal volume, people might realize the art isn't that deep." He chuckled, and the sound anchored me. "Well, let's go find your masterpiece before I suffocate in this tweed." We navigated the maze of partition walls. The theme, "The beauty we ignore," had been interpreted in various ways. There was a blurry photo of a dead rat labeled Cycle of Life. There was a series of close-ups of chewing gum stuck to shoe soles. "Innovative," Samuel noted dryly, looking at a photo of a pothole. "We're doomed," I sighed. "I took a portrait. It's too literal. It's not edgy." Then we turned a corner, and there it was. It wasn't in the back corner. It was centered on a well-lit wall, framed in simple black wood. Visible, Eleanor Vance 35mm film. My breath caught in my throat. It was larger than the 4x6 print I had held in my kitchen. Blown up to this size, the grain of the film gave the image a raw, tactile quality. In the photo, Samuel wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking through it. The golden light caught every detail: the fray of his collar, the scar above his eyebrow, the deep, soulful intelligence in his eyes. He didn't look pitiable. He looked resilient. He looked like a king in exile. A young couple was standing in front of it. The man, wearing a scarf that probably cost more than my car, leaned in. "Look at the eyes," he murmured to his partner. "It's not just a portrait of a homeless man. It's haunting. You can feel the history." "It feels respectful," the woman replied. "Like the photographer really knew him." I felt Samuel stiffen beside me. I glanced at him. He was staring at his own face, his jaw tight. "I didn't know I looked like that," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Like what?" "Like I still have a soul." I reached out and squeezed his hand, right there in the middle of the gallery. "You never lost it, Samuel. You just forgot where you put it." Suddenly, a microphone squealed. The crowd hushed. A woman with severe bangs and a kimono-style dress stepped onto a small platform. Good evening, everyone. I'm Marla, the curator. Thank you for joining us for Hidden City. We had over 200 entries this year. She droned on about artistic integrity and the urban landscape. I tuned her out, happy enough just to see my photo on the wall. That was the victory. I didn't need anything else. And now, Marla said, checking a card. The jury has selected a winner. For its technical proficiency, but more importantly, for its profound emotional resonance. The first prize goes to Visible by Eleanor Vance. The room applauded. Polite, gallery applause. My brain stopped working. I stood frozen, blinking behind my glasses. Samuel nudged me with his elbow. Go, he hissed. That's you, Duchess. I can't, I stammered. Go up there, he said, his dark eyes shining with pride. Go get our $500. I walked to the platform on legs that felt like jelly. I took the microphone. The lights were blinding. I looked out at the sea of strangers, and then I found the one face I knew. The man in the tweed blazer, giving me a thumbs up. I'm not a photographer, I began, my voice shaking. I'm a receptionist, and the man in the photo isn't a model. He's my friend. His name is Samuel. The room went quiet. Really quiet. We walk past people every day, I continued, gaining a little strength. We look at our phones, we look at our shoes, we worry about our 401ks, but sometimes, if you just stop, if you just look up and actually see the person in front of you, you might find something beautiful. Samuel gave me this camera because he thought I needed to see the world again, but I think the world just needed to see him. I looked at Samuel. He tipped an imaginary hat to me. Thank you, I whispered. The applause that followed wasn't polite gallery applause. It was loud. It was real. Later that night, outside the gallery, the air was crisp and cold. I held the envelope with the check in one hand and the Canon AE1 in the other. Well, Samuel said, exhaling a cloud of smoke into the night air. You're famous, Eleanor. An artiste. We're famous, I corrected. Half of this is yours. I don't need $250, he scoffed, though I saw him eyeing the diner across the street. But I wouldn't say no to that burger you promised, with bacon. Bacon it is, I said. We walked down the street, the city lights blurring around us. I didn't feel invisible anymore. And walking beside me, with his head held high in his thrift store blazer, neither did Samuel. The check for $500 didn't change my life financially. It paid for a month of groceries and a very sensible pair of winter boots. But the ripple effect of that photograph? That was something I couldn't have budgeted for. The Monday after the gallery opening, I walked into the Good Shepherd Senior Center prepared for the usual routine of bingo disputes and lukewarm coffee. Instead, I found Mrs. Holloway taping a copy of the City Arts magazine to the reception desk. It's crooked, Patricia, I pointed out, hanging up my coat. It's artistic, she sniffed, stepping back to admire the page where Samuel's face stared out, noble and raw under the headline, The Unseen Neighbor. Besides, we have to support our local celebrities. Mrs. Gable has already asked if you do glamour shots. She wants to look like Marilyn Monroe. I laughed, a sound that felt lighter than it had in years. Tell her I charge in oatmeal cookies. But the real change wasn't at the center. It was online. The magazine article had mentioned Samuel's story, the former creative professional who lost his way after grief took the wheel. The internet, usually a place of cat videos and arguments, decided to do something uncharacteristically kind. A Help Samuel Start Over fund popped up. I didn't start it. A young college student who saw the exhibit did. In 3 days, it raised $4,000. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't a mansion. But it was a deposit. 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of a studio apartment in a converted attic on the east side. It was small, the floorboards creaked, and the radiator hissed like an angry snake. To me, it was drafty. To Samuel, it was a palace. "It has a window," he said, standing in the middle of the empty room, clutching a bag of groceries. "And a lock." "I haven't had a lock in 5 years, Eleanor. Do you know what it feels like to close a door and know the world can't get in?" "I can imagine," I said, suppressing the urge to cry. I handed him a housewarming gift, a framed print of Visible. "You need something for the walls. They're too beige." Samuel laughed, hanging the photo on a nail that was already there. "Beige isn't so bad, Duchess. It's a warm color. It's the color of starting over." He turned to me, his eyes clear. He had shaved the unruly beard down to a neat goatee, and he was wearing a flannel shirt I'd found at Goodwill. He looked 10 years younger. "I got a job," he announced. "You did? Samuel, that's amazing. Where?" "The library. They needed a part-time archivist, someone to organize the old city records in the basement. Apparently, they like that I'm quiet and I treat old paper like it's gold." He smiled, a genuine toothy grin. "I start Monday. I'm going to be surrounded by stories, Eleanor." "You are a story, Samuel," I said. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale. I didn't quit my job to become the next Annie Leibovitz. I still answered phones at the senior center. I still drove my beige sedan. But the weekends were different. I started a small side business called Silver Linings. I specialized in portraits of the elderly, not the stiff, airbrushed kind, but real photos. Photos of hands kneading dough, of eyes crinkling with laughter, of scars that told survival stories. I helped people see the beauty in their own history, just as Samuel had helped me see mine. Even Sophie came around. She flew in for Thanksgiving, and instead of criticizing my apartment, she spent an hour looking through my portfolio. "Mom," she said, pausing on a photo of Mr. Henderson playing chess. "You're actually really good. This is cool." Coming from a corporate lawyer, cool was the highest praise imaginable. 6 months after the contest, on a crisp Sunday morning in May, I met Samuel at the park. The snow had melted, replaced by that electric green of Minnesota spring. Samuel was sitting on a bench, not his old bench, but a different one, near the flower garden. He wasn't wearing the pea coat. He was wearing a light windbreaker and holding a camera. Not my Canon, a Nikon. Used, slightly battered, but functional. "Bought it with my second paycheck," he said as I sat down. "It's digital. I know, I'm a traitor to the film cause. But film is expensive, and I have rent to pay." "You sold out," I teased, bumping his shoulder with mine. "Next thing you know, you'll be on TikTok." "Don't push it, Duchess." He lifted the Nikon. "So, what's the lesson today, Professor Vance?" I looked at him. I looked at the blooming tulips. I looked at a group of teenagers filming a dance video and an old couple holding hands. "No lesson?" I said, lifting my Canon AE1. "Just hunting. I hear the light is good by the fountain." We walked together along the path, 2 people in their 50s who society had once written off as finished. The widow and the vagrant, the receptionist and the homeless man. Labels that didn't stick anymore. We stopped by the fountain. The water sprayed into the air, catching the sunlight and turning it into 1,000 diamonds. "You know," Samuel said, squinting through his viewfinder, "people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks." "People say a lot of things," I replied, adjusting my aperture ring. Click. "People say beige is boring. People say homeless men are invisible. People are usually wrong." Samuel snapped a photo of me. I didn't shy away. I smiled. A real smile, one that reached my eyes behind the rimless glasses.
Ready?
He asked. Always, I said. We moved forward, lenses raised, ready to capture whatever came next. We weren't focused on the past, or the regrets, or the things we had lost. We were focused on the good. And through the viewfinder, the future looked sharp, bright, and beautifully, perfectly in focus.